The Lima group of Latin American nations plus Canada has lined up against Venezuela's leader Nicolas Maduro. The 14 nations have slammed him for planning an election without opposition lawmakers' agreement, and Peru has pulled his invitation to April's Summit of the Americas. Meanwhile, neighbouring Colombia has called for international aid to help cope with the humanitarian crisis caused by thousands of Venezuelans fleeing over the border to escape the economic disaster back at home. Last week, Colombia tightened border controls and heightened security in frontier towns. Critics of Maduro blame him for the country's protracted severe recession. It's led to protests over food, fuel and medicine shortages and has thrown thousands into abject poverty. Biologists at the California Academy of Sciences have handed out heart-shaped felt material to the museum's African penguins. The birds use the cloth as nesting material to help attract mates and to help keep the mates they already have happy.
It's very important for you to get a mate to have a nice looking nest. So we kind of celebrate that a little bit on Valentine's Day. You'll see both the males and the females taking nesting material. In the wild, of course, they'd be using natural fibers. They nest sometimes right in the sand. They'll dig out a hole in the sand and they'll decorate it with plants, rocks, sticks, whatever they can get.
The nesting project is part of a species survival plan the Academy created to help grow the African penguin population, which is endangered in the wild. The man convicted of setting off pressure cooker bombs in New York in 2016 has been given 2 life sentences. Afghan-born US citizen Ahmad Khan Rahimi injured 30 people when one of the bombs exploded in Manhattan. According to federal prosecutors, the 30-year-old has shown no remorse for his actions. Rahimi was accused of planting several homemade bombs, including one along the route of a Marine Corps charity race. Some failed to detonate, and others were dealt with by police explosives experts. Rahimi was arrested 2 days after the attacks following a shootout with police, which left him in hospital for weeks.
Just days before he hosts the US Secretary of State, Turkey's president has said US forces in Syria may be in for an Ottoman slap. The warning comes as the US continues to fight alongside Kurdish fighters in Syria. Those who are saying that if they were attacked they would answer aggressively, well, obviously it's very clear that they have never gotten an Ottoman slap in their life. In its fight against so-called Islamic State, the US has both relied on and armed Kurdish fighters. But Erdogan's government considers those fighters terrorists, putting it on a collision course with the US.
Denmark's Prince Henrik has died at the age of 83. The royal house said the French-born prince, husband of Queen Margrethe, passed away peacefully in his sleep at Fredensborg Palace. Both the Queen and their 2 sons were by his side. Last month, Henrik was forced to cut short a visit to Egypt after doctors diagnosed him with pneumonia. On his return to Copenhagen, a benign tumour was discovered in his left lung and he contracted an infection. He sparked controversy last year when he announced he did not wish to be buried next to the Queen, breaking centuries of tradition. He claimed he was unhappy she'd never acknowledged him as her equal. Shortly after, the palace announced that Prince Henrik was suffering from dementia.
US and Kurdish forces attack a Syrian government base in the oil-rich region of Deir ez-Zor in Syria. Russian media say an unknown number of private Russian military contractors were killed, possibly up to 200. US officials estimate the death toll at around 100, with up to 300 injured. They were unable to say how many are Russians. Russian media said the private contractors were part of pro-government forces that advanced on oil fields in the eastern Deir ez-Zor province and were targeted by the United States. The reports cite activists who say at least 4 Russian citizens were killed in Syria on Wednesday. If confirmed, the news could further inflame tensions between Moscow and Washington. U.S. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis says Russia's told the U.S. there were no Russians in the area of the strike. Mattis said he saw the news reports about Russian contractors possibly being casualties of the bombing. Ties between the two countries are already under pressure over Ukraine, the war in Syria, and the alleged Russian meddling in the 2016 U.S. presidential election.
A top US national security official has said he has no doubt Russia will pursue more cyber attacks on the US and use social media and other means to undermine the country's democracy. The warning came as several top US spy masters were giving evidence before the Senate Intelligence Committee about global threats facing the nation.
Persistent and disruptive cyber operations will continue against the United States and our European allies, using elections as opportunities to undermine democracy, sow discord, and undermine our values.
US intelligence claims to have determined that Russia used hacking and propaganda to tilt the 2016 presidential election. But President Trump has presented it as sour grapes from the losing Democrats.
Commonwealth leaders are reported to be meeting to discuss the succession to Queen Elizabeth when she dies. The Queen is said to be backing her son, but success is not hereditary and will not pass automatically to Prince Charles. So how will the decision be made?
And if it was a matter of which country's turn would it be, this could potentially be disastrous, because a country like Sri Lanka, which has an extremely dodgy human rights record, I mean, that's the last possible solution that you want.
Queen Elizabeth became head of the Commonwealth in 1952. Over the intervening years, the world has gone through great change, which raises the question of whether the Commonwealth itself is still relevant.
I don't think the Commonwealth will fall apart. If it was falling apart, you wouldn't have countries like Mozambique and Cameroon, who haven't any connections with Britain, who've joined it in recent years. I don't think this will occur because they're special diplomatic ties, for example, high commissioners rather than ambassadors. The fact that they're linked with a very special form of soft power in the Commonwealth, and that has prominence. So no, I think the Commonwealth will continue. The point is you want it to continue with the highest possible profile, and that is linked to the world's highest profile royal family.
Maybe it's too early to ask the question. At 91, the Queen is still in excellent health, and her mother lived until she was 101.
Julian Assange's stay in Ecuador's London embassy is set to continue after he lost his appeal to have his UK arrest warrant dropped. The WikiLeaks founder's legal team had argued it was no longer in the public interest to pursue him for failing to answer bail at a police station as he forced extradition to Sweden in 2012. However, senior district judge Emma Arbuthnot disagreed and the warrant's been upheld. The WikiLeaks founder skipped bail by seeking asylum in the embassy in 2012. The Israeli Prime Minister's fate lies in the hands of the country's Attorney General. Avichai Mandelblit will decide whether to press charges against Benjamin Netanyahu over allegations of bribery. The decision could take months. There's also been speculation Netanyahu might call early elections. But in a televised address on Tuesday night, he says he's certain the next elections will be held on schedule. They're not due until November 2019. He called the allegations against him baseless. Netanyahu's given every indication he intends to remain in office while fighting the legal battle. There's not been much public pressure from coalition partners for him to step down. However, that could change as details of the cases emerge. Israeli media say one of the two allegations involves the receipt of gifts from businessmen. The others related to attempts to gain positive coverage in an Israeli newspaper.
Televidente, momento para outro espaço comercial, ora nosso Back Deporte.